Welcome to the Limitless Ladies in Leadership podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and I've created a space for the many powerful, creative, and limitless female leaders to share their stories. From female CEOs to professional athletes and doctors, every powerful woman has a story to tell. There's no guarantee where this podcast will take us, so welcome to the unfiltered, unedited, and badass space for all women to align. Let's get started. On the phone with me today is Olympic medalist and founder of Switch for Good, Dotsie Bausch. Dotsie was featured on the popular Netflix documentary, Gamechangers. She holds 8 U.S. National Olympic titles, 2 Pan American gold medals, and a world record. Dotsie has also become a powerful influencer for the plant-based eating community for athletes and non-athletes alike. Dotsie captured her triumphant story in the Netflix documentary Personal Gold. Her Switch for Good television commercial featured 6 Olympians, and it was featured on NBC during the 2018 Winter Olympic Games and on ABC during the Academy Awards. Dotsie, I could literally make an entire podcast just reciting off all of your awards and accomplishments, but I'd actually like to hear you speak as well, so welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back with you, girl. We were just talking about how we missed each other and the pandemic put a little glitch in our hanging out. So yeah, we're going to have to fix that.
Thank God for Zoom temporarily, huh?
Oh, Lord, I know.
Oh, man. So before we get started, I do like to ask all of my guests what their personal definition of the word limitless is. So what's your definition?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that was in the title of your show. And damn straight, right? Well, I think there's a lot of aspects to limitless thinking, limitless living, being driven to be limitless. But I guess as it relates to me and how it feels in my heart is it's taking a lot more left turns than right turns. You know, it's not taking the path that everyone else took. To me, this is just, I'm just saying this, the path of least resistance is never the path of a champion. It's just not. I'm in the midst of writing a book right now, and I think that's the quote I'm going to open it up with, because it's that whole meaning and the whole fiber of that just kind of has run through my life. But that's what creates limitless, right? And certainly what makes it so you aren't putting roadblocks in front of yourself, which are, limiting in your life. Right. And we have a tendency, I mean, just the human in general, but for some reason, I feel like especially women, to self-sabotage and throw, as we like to say in cycling, throw tacks in the road, for ourselves. And, no one throws tacks in the road, themselves. It's the fans of the other riders that are throwing tacks so that the rider they don't love gets a flat and can't make it up the road. So, I think it's choosing that road less traveled that eventually, drives you into living a limitless life.
I love it. Can you repeat that quote again? That was so powerful.
I literally just the other night I said it and my husband goes, "Wait, did you just say that or did you read that?" I'm like, "No, I just said it." The path of least resistance is never the path of a champion. It's not any kind of brilliance, but it's just, sometimes you just put some words together and it's like, oh yeah, that's probably, that's true.
I love it. I love that so much. Chills, literally. So before all of your accomplishments, I want to know more about who Dotsie was as a young child. Did you always have aspirations to be a professional athlete?
No, definitely not. I started really late as a cyclist at 26, actually, after healing from anorexia. Yeah. But as a little girl, I grew up in Kentucky. And so I naturally grew up riding horses. And I loved every aspect and experience of the horses and the horse riding. My parents would drop me off in the early morning on a Saturday morning. I would beg them not to pick me up till after dark. I liked mucking the stalls. I liked washing the horses. I liked picking out their hooves. I just loved everything about it. And so there was an aspect, obviously, to I ended up competing in saddlebred horseback riding and equitation. That is very competitive, but I would consider the horse the athlete, not so much the person, right? So I grew up in a competitive sport, and I had a competitive nature, but like my physiology was not built yet to be an athlete.
Oh, that's awesome. So you just mentioned a pretty heavy topic, anorexia, and I know you've struggled with some pretty intense stuff through your life, a lot in which I can relate to as well. Do you mind sharing some of those struggles?
Well, sure. First and foremost, I think it's important to understand that anorexia is not about food. I mentor a lot of young females, and that is one of their biggest struggles, is explaining what they're going through and explaining what's happening to them and inside of them to their families or loved ones, right? Because everyone's just like, just come on out with me and we'll just have a cheeseburger. It'll be okay. Yeah. I got that a lot. I don't know why they always choose the cheeseburger, but it's the food where let's just go. It's like Americana, like let's just have a cheeseburger and everything will be good. So it's important to state that. I feel like for anybody who is listening, who is struggling, already knows it's not about the food. And for those that love those that are struggling, it's important for them to understand that it's not about the food. It's about, traveling through your own inner pain and your own demons and your own inadequacies and your own fears. It's very similar to a drug addiction or alcoholism addiction. Just pick your poison, and mine was starving myself. It felt good at the time. And, you get a bit of a high. It's very euphoric. When you don't have enough calories. I mean, there's literal physiological mechanisms that unfold that give you a morphine-like sense and feeling in your body and in your mind. I think that's probably because our bodies are built to survive, right? So, for me, it started out of a feeling in my life where I felt very out of control. I had graduated college. I realized I didn't really want to do what I had just majored in. I took out huge loans for college, had no money to hardly pay them back, much less take out more loans to go study something else and graduate in something else and something different. And I felt just frozen in fear, like, oh my God, what have I just done? And now I don't even want to do this for a living. And so what just started as a feeling of trying to usurp control, really that's all that it was. It was baby steps there in the beginning, where I just realized one day that I was, wildly controlling every aspect of what was going in my mouth, because it made me feel like I had control over something. So I think, and that is certainly, there's all sorts of reasons that people act out on their inner pain. For me, it was usurping control and trying to grab some kind of control of my life at that time. And then it spun out, which it can with alcohol or drugs or sex or eating disorders. It just took on a complete life of its own and almost took my life.
Wow. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. I know that, like, it's with my own experience that even though it was in the past, sometimes it can bring up some ideas that I'm like, dang, like, I can't believe that was me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. You can't believe some of the things that you thought and you acted out on and you experienced. And and I'm glad for you and for me that those are distant memories now and we're not still in it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the recovery. What happened and what was the shift?
Yeah, well, as in most recovery stories, as I'm sure as yours could be similar, and so many people that I talk to, it's a roller coaster. It was definitely not like the laser drive into, I went into treatment and I got better in it. Yeah. So it was different treatments. It was outpatient. It was inpatient. It was, my mom trying to do an intervention. I lived in Philadelphia at the time, and it ended with me screeching her to the sidewalk of the Philadelphia airport and me physically throwing my 105-pound mother out on the sidewalk and blooding her knee. So it brings out some pretty gnarly demons when you're that sick and you're struggling that much. So, all sorts of roller coasters there, most of it just because I didn't want to get better. You gotta, you gotta want it. They aren't joking when they say you gotta want it. Yeah. So, it was your, it's your best friend and your worst enemy. It's making you so sick and it's making you really completely irrelevant in your own life. You're just not even present, but it feels so good. And you go back to the control and you go back to the euphoria. So eventually, finally, I I tried to commit suicide by running out in the freeway, in the middle of the freeway, 76 freeway outside of Philadelphia. And obviously that was unsuccessful. And that was a turning point for me where I said, okay, I am going to try to get better, not for me, but for my family, because my family was like any family after their son or daughter's suicide attempt. Like they were just beside themselves, as putting it mildly. And I saw that fear and that pain and that agony that they were in. And I thought, okay, you got to try. Like, you're probably not going to get better, but you just got to give it a try. And that was the turning point. And that's important because, I think you always eventually have to want it, but it doesn't have to be like that impetus, right? It doesn't have to be that first moment. It doesn't have to be about you. It can be somebody that you love and go, okay, I'm going to try to see if I can get better. Yeah.
I mean, that's my story too with recovering from drug addiction. Was I had tried, I'd been to multiple detoxes and rehabs, but it wasn't in me. And what eventually motivated me was my grandma, because she had seen me at my worst moment and didn't even recognize me. And then for me, that was just like, holy crap. Okay, I'm going to at least do it for her. And then of course, over time, that changed to gaining enough confidence to want to keep going for myself as well. So I'm grateful for that.
So there was an actual moment, like she did not know it was you. Like you went to visit her and she was like, who is this person?
I had lost everything when I was in LA due to my heavy drug addiction, and somebody had stolen my car and totaled it, and then I stopped going to work, and then I lost my place and blah, blah, blah. And so she was kind of like that last resort, because I never wanted her to see me like that. And so she was like, well, I'll buy you an Amtrak ticket to come down to San Diego, but you got to go to detox. Like the second you get here, you're calling and you're getting a bed. And I said, okay. And so I jumped on the train, and my mom had driven down to San Diego to be there as well. And I getting off the train waving like, grandma. And she's looking around like no clue. And then I see the second she makes eye contact with me, and she's like, and just like had her hands over her face. And I was like, oh, like I didn't realize, that I had gotten that bad. And I had never seen my grandma cry. And that was like the biggest thing that I was like, okay, all right, this is the time. That was definitely enough.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's intense. That's so intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a defining moment for you that you said, okay, wait, let me see if I can put this together.
Yeah, for sure. You, so, okay, you're recovering, things are starting to get better. Where does the bike come into play? Like, is this around the same time, or had there been some time removed?
It was a few years later. I mean, so after all that, brouhaha that I was putting my family through, and, sort of pretending like I was going to get better, but I knew I really wasn't going to put my heart into it. I ended up moving out to Los Angeles for the sunshine, really. And I was seeking someone to work with. Like I was really ready to get to work. And now I'm coming to where I am like, okay, I think maybe it's possible. So happened to see an ad in the LA Weekly, a classified ad that somebody was speaking that night at the Borders bookstore, where there used to be bookstores and we used to go hang out with each other, about fear. She was going to speak on fear. And as you know, there's a lot of fear involved in any kind of addictive behavior. So I went to hear her and listen to her that night, and it just hit me like electricity, right? Like just a lightning bolt, that if I could work with this person, this is my person. Like I just like magnet went right up to her afterwards. Like, do you do private stuff? Cause I'm really sick. And she, looked at me kind of like, I can see that, but she didn't say that. So yeah, I got to work. I started working with her, and she was a meditation therapist, but she so that, the crux of it involved me coming back into my body, which was some of the first stuff we worked on, which is what you've completely separated from eating disorder, right? Like you can't feel anything. You don't even know if you're hungry or not hungry. You don't, any of the natural, normal, situations that people have around food and eating, you don't have anymore. It's all gone. You've completely disconnected. So she helped me to come back into my body via some, active meditation and work. And she gave me homework and tools to work with in the homework. I just really gravitated toward that type of therapy. The therapy I had done before was all just like, just a ton of talking. Mm-hmm. It was just like, all right, that's enough of this. I have actually issues right now and I need some tools and help. So she was like, I finally was able to kind of like state that too. Like when I first sat down with her, go, listen, I'm sick now. We can talk about my childhood in a year or whatever. I don't want to talk about my childhood right now. I don't want to talk about why. I want to talk about now, and I want to talk about how. Can you deliver that? And she's like, absolutely. And she literally did not bring up anything of even inquiring about my childhood for like 9 months.
Wow.
So we just got to work on the real issue. And I really leaned into that because I learned so much more about myself, given that by the time we got to like whatever, my childhood and just my own journey, I was healthier. So I was able to like lean into that part of the therapy too, so that at the very end of that journey with her, she is the one that suggested for me to try the bike. So she was like, it was just, she just wanted me to, I was living out in LA, like I said, and I loved being outside. I was living in Venice Beach. And she said, I know that you really want to be able to move your body in a healthy way. And why don't you just pick some kind of like movement or exercise or something that you can get into, beach volleyball or just whatever, and I was like, oh, maybe I could get a bike. Cause I see lots of people riding their bikes around. It just looks so fun. And
wow.
And so I owe it all to her and saying, pick something. And then luckily I didn't pick beach volleyball because I'm feeling like I wouldn't have made it to the Olympics in that. I don't know.
So do you remember what year it was when you first got on the bike?
Oh, definitely. 96.
1996. Wow. And from there, I mean, the Olympics are a very massive goal. What inspired you to reach so high from like literally just picking up a bike for therapy to I'm going to be in the Olympics?
Well, I mean, I didn't think that for years.
Okay.
It was like, that wasn't, no. I mean, people would have told you it was insane to even mention that for probably the first 10 years. I mean, I picked up a bike and kind of started riding. Then I did it like a charity ride. And then I started to try some races, and then you have to go through the amateur ranks, and you have to, so it's quite a journey there. But by the time I made it onto the U.S. national team, which was literally just from them noticing me from podium at a national championships against all the best women in the U.S. And I was definitely a nobody at that point. That from that point, which was probably 2000, the Olympics are still 12 years away. So I'd say the first, good half of my cycling career, the Olympics were not like in my sphere of possibility. I was just like proud to be, I was really proud to be on the national team. I was really excited that I was traveling the world, racing a bicycle. Like, what the fuck? Who thought that could have been a thing? And then I was proud to be a domestique, as the riders that helped the star riders. And then I was proud to I won a few races myself. You just kind of I really just describe that whole 12-year period of time as it was 12 years of discovery and 12 years of just not saying no to myself. It was just me pushing through barriers and past boundaries. There's a lot of men. Cycling is a very misogynistic sport. And there was a lot of men that told me there's no way I was going to be able to do this or be successful at this. And they're going to be in the book for sure. But there were never any women that told me that I couldn't do what I thought it might be possible. That's interesting. But so, I don't know, 3 years out from Olympics is I guess the time that I think I could make this team. Wow. I thought I had a shot. So it is a long journey there, but yeah.
I'd love to ask you too, how old were you when you were in the Olympics?
39 and a half.
See, and that is so crazy to me too. You hear about these people that train their entire lives and, you know, they become Olympic athletes in their late 20s, early 30s, but they've been practicing forever and you just kind of come out of nowhere and you're like, cool, I'm going to do this. And then you do.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that, but it does sound like that. I agree, but it did not feel like a quick moment from I guess 26 to 39 and a half. But no, I completely recognize that that's a bit rare or a bit odd, and that, you know, most people have been training since they were little tinies, doing their system, doing their sport. I think there was obviously, you know, physiological talent in there, some VO2 talent, some, you know, just being able to process oxygen better than my neighbor. But there was also just a lot of, willful, like, just, I was very willful in being able to suffer. You know, I mean, I allowed that to cycling is a very high suffering sport, like cross country skiing is, or rowing, or anybody that's done those sports. So that ability to suffer like that, you know, some of it, you know, probably the training came from the eating disorder, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And for sure. And there was something about cycling in the suffering in that I knew how it didn't matter how deep I was going, or how bad it hurt, or how much my lungs were seething, or the lactic acid was burning up my legs. I knew the suffering was going to end. I mean, mm-hmm. How long is an interval or a race or a training session? And with the anorexia, I mean, I didn't think it was ever going to end. So I had this really unique perspective coming into a high suffering sport that maybe not everyone has. You know, yeah. It was like, I was like always inviting the suffering in. I was like, oh, because it'll be done by 3, the suffering. And then I can like go out to dinner, you know, but with the eating disorder, you're like, oh shit, this is so much suffering that I want to die.
Yeah. And it sounds like to me too, that you just totally shifted that unhealthy behavior of the eating disorder to something that was healthy and something that was working towards really big goals and using that energy in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
And a huge part of you we've barely even brought up is that you're a huge promoter and proponent of a whole food plant-based diet. I know that this hasn't always been the case for you, but when did you first make this decision, and what was it that had you choose?
Yeah. No, that was a later in life thing too. I like to do things late, like watch out 80s, here I come. I came in through a lot of your listeners, because of you and who you are and how you spread the good word, are going to be aware of what like the ethical route means. Right. So I came into the understanding of what goes on behind closed doors in animal agriculture. And because I grew up with so many animals, so horses, but also like lots of other animals, and was deeply in love with them, and have always had just a unique connection to the animal world, and a very loving, respectful connection. It just sort of, came into my soulful view at that period of time that wait a minute, if that's what's happening, and even if it's not horrible, they're still killing them. And if I love something, that probably doesn't mean eating it. Like that just alignment was just like, duh. And so I just charted on a course of not eating them or anything from them. In the beginning, it was just not eating them, right? Because good God, the dairy industry and the egg industry. But wow, then you go down those rabbit holes, and they're almost more horrifying than the meat rabbit hole. And, it's a couple of years out from the Olympics when I'm starting to put these pieces together, and what I can, most of us as ethical vegans can only describe as just a soul shift. It's like you just wake up one day and you're like, look in the mirror and you're like, this is, oh, fuck, like this is the new me. I can't go back. There will be no going back. And you're going to the grocery store, and all of the meat, dairy, and eggs it's no longer food to you. It's a bizarre experience. Like that's not food. Those are body parts over there in the meat section. It's such a bizarre, but wonderful, beautiful journey that I wouldn't trade for the world. But I'm a couple years out from the Olympics. So it's like, okay, this is this is probably not the right thing to do before this. I'm, now I'm 37 and, my teammates are 27 and the competitors are 19. And, it's like, obviously, as we all know, and we get a little older, recovery gets a little harder, repair, all of that. So it was a little scary. I didn't quite know what was going to happen or how it was going to unfold, but obviously it unfolded, well, I'm still alive, first of all, right? We're vegan and you and I are still here. We're having a conversation. We're still living. But amazingly enough, I was able to get enough protein and just, build a ton of, I think the strength building was what shocked me the most because I was part of the status quo for 35 years. So I believed everything that was ever told to us about animal foods and that you literally needed them to be able to be strong and virile and repair and recover. And so, even though I didn't believe that anymore, I think my subconscious believed it.
Yeah.
So you just do, right? And I had been in that for so long. And so the quicker recovery, the better blood flow, the better cell function, the not waking up feeling so exhausted and hungover from training too much. All of that was not wildly surprising to me, but the ability to still gain so much strength, because I gained a lot of strength in those last 2 years. I was like, what the hell is that? Like, this is crazy. I didn't think this was going to be possible. When I started it, I just remember thinking, okay, I'm going to do this. I can't go back. I just hope I can stay the same. Yeah. Like, I just want to stay the same. Because if I'd stayed the same strong, I think I might have still made the team. And that it was just like, that was the prayer. Like, stay the same, don't go backwards, but the opposite happened. Yeah.
So you were in the Olympics as a plant-based athlete, and you said you'd been vegan for about 2 years at that point.
Yes, I don't say vegan because there were times when I didn't say, oh my God, what's in this at the grocery store or a restaurant, or time, like I wasn't like I am now. So there was stuff coming in for sure, and there was still some egg eating here and there, but everything else was out. But there is a difference. But I was very, very, very plant-based. Yes.
That's awesome. So speaking of making major switches, what switched for good?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the commercial. So as obviously throughout my career as a U.S. athlete, I trained quite often at the United States Olympic training centers, which are the two that I trained at were in Chula Vista and Colorado Springs. Spent this extraordinary amount of my life at those two training centers. And the dairy industry is the title sponsor of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And so the athletes are completely inundated with dairy as a food, which I don't think it's a food for humans last time I checked, but as the most important food group for repair and replenishment, right? Like, that's sold to you there. There's little tiny bits of information on the side, like if you're lactose intolerant, or, have some of this. But back in my day, there weren't like a whole bunch of plant-based options. I'm positive there are now I know that there are, but the recovery bar in the cafeteria at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs was literally all dairy. I shit you not. It was yogurt. It was whey protein to make shakes. There was eggs on it, which is obviously not dairy, but, just hard-boiled eggs. Just, swallow one of those suckers down with some chicken ovulation, and cottage cheese, milk. I mean, it was gross. It was like the white bar. Like, wow. There's only white foods available at this. It's like, no, that's not how you repair. So anyway, knowing that this is not a food for humans, and knowing the cruelty behind the dairy industry, but also knowing how deleterious it is on our body in so many different ways and so many different reasons. After Olympics, I was becoming an activist, and it 2, 3, 4 years, I was leafletting and speaking. I was just finding my voice, finding my activism, going to conferences, learning from the best, and just becoming an activist. And so in 2018, when the Winter Olympics rolled around, there were quite a bit of dairy commercials that were already starting during just Olympic trials, right? And I was watching Olympic trials one night on the couch, and a dairy commercial came on. but it was using Olympic athletes to sell the product. In this very specific commercial, they were using a world champion skier and her beautiful relationship with her very supportive, loving mother to sell cow's milk. And then it's not lost on you and me that relationship is torn apart every day in the dairy industry, the mother and baby. It was all kind of sick and twisted, this commercial, to me, in my view, in my eyes, with my lens on of like, no, I know the truth. And so I just had this idea that, what if we put on a commercial on the closing ceremonies of these very Olympic Games, which at this point, the closing ceremonies are only like 5 weeks away, because I'm watching trials, and Olympics are going to start in about 2 weeks. What if we could put a commercial on with Vegan Olympians saying, we don't need cow's milk to win medals. Like, this is ridiculous. So anyway, long story short, I was able to find the production team and the funding and all of these extraordinary, wonderful, talented, focused people and athletes. I didn't even know any vegan Olympic athletes. I mean, I literally—
That was my question.
It was like, I was like lying. I was like, yes, we could totally do this, because I didn't really think it would happen. So once I got the funding and the production team, like, okay, Dotsie, I remember being at Sundance, because we were there for Gamechangers, and I remember them being like, okay, you've got the athletes, right? And I'm like, oh God, there aren't any. And I was like, I remember thinking, like, who am I gonna? And I remember calling Brendan Brazier, who he's just a hero to all of us vegan Olympians and athletes in general. And he produced two, a Great Britain guy and a Canadian gal, the soccer player and runner, who were just champions, incredible, which was so cool, because I eventually found a couple US athletes, but we only had 6 Olympian on that commercial, but they were from 4 different countries. So it was really cool what kind of came together. So after we put that commercial on, we just had a discussion kind of as a group of us that had done the commercial. It was like, this is kind of a new way forward to tell the story, to tell about veganism, to share in this performance aspect of it that I know that some of these other athletes knew that were in the commercial. Obviously, some of the athletes all of the athletes really that were in the Gamechangers film. And there isn't an organization, there isn't a nonprofit telling the story in this way. There's such extraordinary organizations telling the cruelty story, telling the planetary story, So anyway, we got going. We got going in super late 2018, early 2019 as an organization, and named it Switch for Good. Yeah.
That's amazing. Congrats on that. And it's cool to see this now, because I was around with the very beginning stages of it. So it's been cool to kind of follow up and see where you're at now.
Yeah. We're getting a lot more into, policy change and law changes. We were a big part of changing some aspects of the dietary guidelines that came out this year that we were just so celebrating and so proud of. But we'll always be really strong in advocacy and really believing that the true change is going to come from the public making other choices, so that the industry ends up shutting down. But we have a podcast and we have all sorts of trouble we're planning to get ourselves into this year. So
I don't expect anything less from you. Good. Switching again a little bit. I know you've been an integral part in a lot of people's journeys to a plant-based diet, as well as an inspiration for a lot of athletes. What's a little bit of advice that you'd like to share with people who are interested in furthering themselves, either athletically or in business? Just something kind of a general statement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, so not so much plant-based, how to switch over to a plant-based diet, just kind of like okay. You know how often we get that question. So, gosh, for business or for an athlete, we were talking about a little bit earlier, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Like you're really not going to push through any change or reach any greatness without taking a lot more left turns than right turns, and definitely not taking the path of least resistance, taking that road less traveled, picking the choice and the option that no one else is picking. I mean, that to me is just that has been integral throughout my life of the choices that I've made. And I think that, if you're trying to build anything, it's like, just don't don't follow some exact steps of someone else, but I mean, that can kind of fall into the plant-based diet too. I mean,
that's what I was thinking.
It's so crazy how like why we even eat animals in the first place. Like if you ask anyone that, they don't have an answer. And the reason is literally just because everyone else eats animals. Right. There's no reason. There's no reason. And then we've talked ourselves into that it's healthy and we think that's the way to go. And that's what we need in our body, but so just taking that road less travel and being open to the fact that maybe I could not only survive, but really thrive on plants is kind of that first step. Is it believing that it's worth trying? I think a lot of people try, sort of, maybe I should say pseudo try and fail. I think because they just, first of all, they don't have a conviction from the beginning.
Right.
You need something that it doesn't have to be animals. I mean, I think you eventually have to understand that to just be a diehard, but it can be anything that, any entry point, but have a reason that you're trying it out. And then just, kind of push past the areas in your life where it feels uncomfortable. And most of those areas are when we're eating out with friends or family or holidays, or, those are the times when we're like, we're not the status quo. And it's blaringly obvious that we are completely different, and being able to be confident and sort of, turn people, like, just make them curious without making them feel like you're blaming them. Because, obviously, as every table you ever sit down to and there's a vegan there, the entire conversation turns to their vegan diet. And the vegan hasn't said a word, not a freaking word. Silence on what, they're just like, oh, I'll just have the whatever with the waiter and everything's fine. And they have their meal. And then it's, like, what is that? What is happening?
A potato?
I know. Like, right. It's like the world's perfect food. It is. People need to know that. So just being willing to push through those tough spots, those rough spots, whatever they are, where they just feel a little bit uncomfortable or a little bit. But why do you want to be like everyone else?
Right.
Like, why do you need to eat what everyone else eats? I mean, that doesn't even really make any sense when we say it out loud. It's like, oh yeah, I guess I really don't. But it just feels more comfortable. None of us love being made fun of. And I mean, that there's a little bit of that too, but we're getting there. It's not so much. I mean, now I think it's more, people are nicer and more curious than like, oh God, when they realize you're the vegans at the table, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Like, what do you eat? And they're like, oh cool, this is changing. Okay, I can tell you what I eat.
Yeah, it's a little more comfortable at this point.
Yeah,
so because I have a feeling on this podcast, we've got a lot of non-vegan listeners right now, and I think the question that you can agree on that we get all the time is where do you get your protein? So especially on the level of an Olympic athlete, what are some of your favorite protein sources?
Everything, because everything alive has protein in it, right? Broccoli has protein, lemons have protein. It's the craziest thing. Well, now I don't think about my protein ever, right? And people do need to look at their protein intake and see if it's a bit too much, because I think for most people it is, right? Because we're just completely over protein. As an elite level athlete, I needed, who, as I mentioned before, was growing a lot of muscle, especially those last couple of years in my glutes and hips and hamstrings. I was taking in about 1.3, 1.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for me, it was only like 80, 85 grams of protein a day. So
wow.
It's not yet. That's about, I mean, whoever it is, whoever the people that decide what we should eat in America are, I don't even know, the Dietary Aesthetics Association, whatever they are, their recommendation is 0.8.
Yeah.
Right. Grams per kilogram of body weight. So that's just for if you were to lay on the couch all day, that's how much, it would probably be a good idea. Active people, maybe 1. I think now I'm probably eating 1. I haven't counted in years, but, so ask yourself how much protein you really need, like based on your output and what you're doing. And if you're trying to grow this exorbitant amount of muscle mass, ask that question. But, everything from all the grains I eat to, I love every single bean on planet Earth. So edamame and black beans and kidney beans and garbanzo beans and navy beans and, all of it. Those are probably for me, my main sources. I mean, obviously, as you know, though, all the greens, all the veggies have some protein. That's what's kind of interesting about a plant-based diet. If you were to build, like a delicious bowl with some grains and some greens and some beans and maybe some field roast Italian sausage on there or something, you're everything in there has protein, especially if you're putting, sprinkling nuts and seeds on top, which I'm a huge fan of seeds because they're so nutrient dense. And just think about they are all to sprout an entire plant, a sprout in it. So seeds, oh my God, sesame seeds and pumpkin seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds. Hemp seeds are on everything I eat. I just love them. And they add that like nutty, crunchy flavor. So a bowl like that, it's without even trying, you're at 20 grams.
Yeah.
You know, and somebody might look at that and be like, oh, well, that looks like a lot like a salad. And it's like, well, you know, it's not, but it has, you know, it's like a salad on steroids, but it has a lot of greens in there, but there's quite a bit of protein in a lot of greens. And I'll take kale and massage it with lemon juice and olive oil and salt, a little bit of olive oil and salt. And then you can eat a ton more kale, right? Because raw kale is a little bitter, but it takes a lot to get in the protein that you want, like volume wise. Yeah. But if you massage it down, you know, I mean, I can massage down a bag of kale and then eat it in that bowl I'm just talking about.
Lucky
so
kale.
There's all these little cool tricks. I know, right there.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Just kind of moving on. I know someone like you has always got new, bigger, amazing goals. Is there anything that you're currently working on that you can share with us today?
Well, you know, gosh, what could be maybe helpful for people is I've been going through a massive transition period in my career and work life. As you mentioned, I run Switch for Good, so I'm the executive director of Switch for Good, and have been for, you know, a little bit over 2 years, and have struggled more in these last 2 years than I feel like I've ever struggled from an emotional and mental standpoint. And it took me a long time to understand what the problem was. My poor husband, I just was miserable. I was getting to where like I couldn't wait for the end of Friday, and I was so sad on Sunday night. I'm like, oh God, I've turned into one of these people that, like, you know, dreads work or something. And because it's mission driven, our nonprofit, is we've already talked about. In my head, it was like, no, this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you love doing. This is what you set out to do. And I really believe this is why I'm on planet Earth, is to share this work and share this message. And so that clouded the reality that it's the role that I'm in that is potentially not a great fit for me, which makes it not a great fit for my team because they have a crazy person. And so I think for people that are potentially feeling stuck, it's been really extraordinary and super helpful for me to go on this journey of self-discovery and truth, and ripping down things, making it raw, like literally dealing with my ego and the parts of myself that, you know, that have a bit of a big ego, and shredding those down and trying to understand my truth, which has a lot, you know, my personality, why this role feels so stifling and so difficult to me. I'm an introverted, independent empath. So
I can relate.
That means that okay. So, and people can look kind of all of that stuff up, but it, you know, in the predictive index scale, independence is, you know, the opposite of that is collaboration. And so I had an athletic life where I had to collaborate, you know, with people, but it's not my main jam. I definitely tend to kind of hole up, and I tend to lean away from collaboration instead of into it. And then as an introvert, that means I gain my energy by, you know, spending time alone. Not that I'm shy. That's not a verb. Yeah. That's what it means. So I love deep, rich, personal one-on-one connections, or I like to speak in front of 5,000 people. My worst nightmare is the 10-person Zoom. Like, I literally have this pretty incredible amount of anxiety that builds from it. Well, that's running a small team, especially the last year. Hello, Zoom, and 10 faces staring at you. So anyway, I'm just kind of at the beginning of it, and looking at, you know, an executive director and me moving into more of a president founder type of role. And this is the best thing that anyone's ever said to me. And I think it'll help so many of your listeners who are charting their courses. Somebody said to me, listen, you know, when I'm recognizing this and realizing that the role is not a great fit for me, they said, you have to stop polishing your C's and just go do your A pluses.
Yeah.
That's it. That is just it in a nutshell. That's what I was doing. I've been trying so hard for 2 years to polish my C's. They're just never going to be my A pluses. But I do have A pluses. We all have A pluses, and I have a whole list of A pluses that I've written down that, you know, where Dotsie's energy needs to be put into for Switch for Good. And so, these last couple of years of, oh man, it's been rough, and it's been filled with a lot of fear and a lot of tears, but I'm coming out the other side, and it's finally starting to feel exciting.
Oh,
you know, that when it starts to shift from like, oh God, this is a nightmare, you know, to like, no, this is good. This is going to be good. And it's going to be better for Switch. Cause that's always what's on my mind. What's the best for Switch? What's the best for Switch? And I was never asking what's the best for Dotsie, quite frankly. For 2 years, I haven't asked that question ever. Hadn't even been on my mind. It's like, I don't care if you're miserable, too fucking bad. What's best for Switch? You know, you do that as a founder. I think that's a founder kind of type of mentality. So, what's best for Dotsie is going to be best for Switch. Hello, you're right. Like that's
exactly
what's best for everyone there is what's best for Switch, right? Because all of us that are working there needs to be thriving in that space where they're, you know, they feel that they're at their best
and they're performing their best. So they're going to bring their best. And then guess what? Switch for Good gets to be its best.
Exactly.
God, I related to
sounds so simple, doesn't it? But it's like,
I relate to so much of that too, because it's funny. I'm like one of those extroverted introverts. Like it's funny because I've had the other podcast for 4 years, and I just started this one, and I've, you know, spoken at events and done a lot of things on camera or in person. And a lot of people's perception is that like, oh, you're so extroverted, you're so like confident, you're so all these things. I'm like, no, I force myself to do these things because I know that there's some value in that for me as well as other people, hopefully. But on the inside, I'm like, I get anxiety. I'd rather just go hide somewhere sometimes. And but really, like you were saying, pushing through some of those uncomfortable areas and then realizing what are my strengths, what are the areas that I'm really passionate about and also really good at, and how can I use those to, whether that means a career shift or a relationship shift or a friendship shift or whatever, what do I get to do for me that will allow me to show up better to be there for somebody else?
That is just hit the nail on the head. Yep.
I love it.
Me too.
Man. So what kind of advice do you have for women who feel defeated by some of the personal bumps in their roads?
Well, it's always really hard to see it in the moment, but I mean, every single one of those bumps are put there for a very specific reason for you to be able to rise above. I mean, you know, and it's a bit of cliche-ish in there, but I mean, just think if we didn't have any bumps, if we had no bumps, right? Like it was just smooth sailing. First of all, there'd be zero appreciation on the other side because like it was like super easy to get here. Second of all, you'd be the most shallow person on planet Earth, right? There'd be no depth to your character and that you would have had to go anything. A lot of times I like to think about what would it be like if there weren't these challenges when you're in the middle of one, like if I never had any. It's nauseating to think about not having any bumps because you're like, well, it would just be filled with nothingness. So, you know, you'd never had, I mean, that's why all the great, like, you know, fun women's t-shirts out there are about the struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, because like, that's where we find our power. So I think it's helpful to look at it the other way. Like, what if it was void of that? And most people's face are like, ugh, you know, it just kind of crunch. Cause like, no, that would be really awful. And then, but I think some of us like, okay, so I don't need so many though. Like, right. You know, like I'll take them
down.
And that I can't answer. I would like there to be less as well. I think sometimes, you know, it's like maybe not 5 a month. How about 1? Like But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I was just listening to the way that you were saying that, and it made so much sense. It's like, we had talked before the podcast that I was training for a race, and I was thinking as you were talking, I'm like, well, if every single person could do a 60K in a 12-hour span, in the middle of summer, I wouldn't really care to do it,
Right. It wouldn't even be called what it's called, and it wouldn't even be, it's damn straight. That's why people get the Ironman tattoos on there. It's like, not everybody could do this. Yeah. Me included.
Oh, was there anything else that you wanted to share today before we start to wrap it up?
Well, for all of the omnivores out there that are curious, because you got to be curious, right? If you're not curious, you're not ready yet. But who are curious about maybe diving down a plant-based diet, I'd like to offer Danielle and myself up to be your personal mentors. I know I can speak for you, and like your favorite thing in the whole wide world is just to walk with somebody on their journey. Like it's so amazing and so fun.
Yeah.
So if you need help, like just reach out. Like, one of us. It's so cool to have a buddy, and it's so cool to have a buddy that's like, oh, I got this figured out. Here you go. And have some camaraderie and share the joy with. I literally just love doing that. So if you're curious, there's the internet, and there's a lot of help and support out there, but don't hesitate to have one of us be your buddy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for throwing that out there, because that is something that, I know a lot of people have questions, and I think even though it's gotten a lot better, there's still a certain stigma around the word vegan. But there's now, because it's growing, there's a healthy way to do it, and there's a very unhealthy junk food way to do it. And obviously you and I stand more on the whole food plant-based side. So definitely there to help. There's plenty of resources, but like you said, sharing experiences definitely helps. If people are interested in following your journey or learning more about you, I know your personal Instagram is Vegan Olympian. Personal website is dotsiebauchusa.com. We'll spell that in the description of the podcast. Switch for Good is also on Instagram as Switch for Good, but it's the number 4, and the website Switch for Good, spelled the same way, .org. Are there any other websites or social platforms that you wanted to mention today?
I think you got them in, girl.
Sweet.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So thank you so much, Dotsie. It was really good catching up with you, and I can't wait to see what else you have coming, because I know someone like you has always got something going on.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Congrats on starting this. I'm going to be an avid listener. I can't wait to hear all the ladies you have on.
Ladies.
Powerful. Yeah. Information.
Thank you. So for all of our listeners, don't forget to check out the podcast Patreon page at Limitless Ladies in Leadership to support the podcast and keep episodes coming. Also, check out Dotsie's social media and website links, which are going to be listed in the description of the podcast. Thank you, everyone who's listening, and we will catch you next time.